Welcome everyone to our short course called Introduction to Qualitative Evidence Synthesis. My name is Lynn Hendricks and I'm at the Center for Evidence-Based Healthcare at Stellenbosch University, where we are running this 8-week online short course from. And I'm very excited to share with you the very first lecture in the course that you will be participating in. So let's get started with this first session, Introduction to Qualitative Evidence Synthesis. We'll look at making sense of qualitative research, narrative versus systematic reviews, what QES are and why they are important, where we can locate these qualitative systematic reviews, title and protocol registration, and considerations that you should make before starting a QES. So before we dive right in, let's take a moment to stop, adjust, and reframe our minds into the qualitative paradigm. I have a simple exercise that I would like you all to participate in. So have a look at this elephant and concentrate really hard. Does he have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or even 8 legs? Logically, we know an elephant should have 4 legs, but this picture, depending on from which frame of reference you look at this elephant, you might see more than 4 or less than. This brings about the concept of subjectivity in qualitative research. When we think about subjectivity, we think about our own biases, preferences, and personal feelings that might influence the way we see or interpret types of data. When we think about qualitative research, we think about a methodology that uses focus groups, interviews, and observations to produce narrative types of findings. Why is this important to qualitative evidence synthesis? Because when we are working with this type of synthesis, we are including qualitative research that is considered primary studies. So our primary studies can be like the one displayed on the screen, which says the experiences and preparedness of family carers for best interest decision making of a relative living with advanced dementia. This is considered one primary study, and when we think about the synthesis, we are including more than one of these primary studies that consider the same research question. So let's briefly look at the differences between qualitative and quantitative research. In qualitative research, we focus on understanding and interpreting social interactions. Our sample sizes are relatively smaller compared to larger quantitative studies. The types of data we collect is words, images, or objects. We use open-ended responses in our interviews. In our participant observations, we rather write longer narrative observations and field notes. And when we do data analysis, we use patterns such as thematic analysis or coding. The researcher in qualitative research is a very important element. The data travels to, from, and with the researcher throughout the process. The researcher influences the questions that are asked, the types of responses that are received, and how all of this is made sense of in the report. And these are really important to keep in mind when we consider how we synthesize all of these primary qualitative research studies into one systematic review. The results are usually specialized and particular and not made with the purpose of generalizing to larger populations like we do in quantitative research. Qualitative findings are generally used to develop theory. We use it to understand the subjective experiences of those or other actors in the environments. It contributes to knowledge, change, and development. It also clarifies unexpected or significant findings in quantitative research. Doing this, it contributes to health and healing and provides in-depth information and additional perspectives. So there really is a place for qualitative findings in research, And a lot of you who are on this course or are watching this video have experienced some sort of qualitative research study before. You may have done it as a student, may know a colleague who conducted a qualitative research study, or may be supervising students with other qualitative research projects. Now that we have a good understanding of the realm and the type of research we are working with, I'd like us to now consider what evidence is. Because in the word qualitative evidence synthesis, it's made up of three very important words. We've discussed qualitative. Let's look at the second one. Evidence can be evidence of effectiveness. So this is usually found when we are looking at the extent to which an intervention can be used appropriately or achieves its intended effects. We can have evidence of feasibility, which is the extent to which an intervention is practical and whether or not an intervention is physically, culturally, or financially practical or possible within a given context. We have evidence of appropriateness, so the extent to which an intervention fits with a situation, and then evidence of meaningfulness, and this is the extent to which an intervention is positively experienced by the population. So when QES first emerged in the research, it was alongside um, systematic reviews that generally focused on intervention research. And at its birth of QES, we tried to move the methodologies of quantitative systematic reviews onto this new approach of synthesizing qualitative primary studies. As you know, and the table we've just seen, there are very distinct differences between qualitative and quantitative research, even on the primary level. So when we move to the systematic review level, we also need to consider how we approach this type of research, the paradigms we hold, the methodologies that are appropriate, and it's really important for us to think about how we apply that at synthesis level. I mean, there are so many questions that came up for me when I started in QES, thinking around subjectivity, thinking around how we make sense of individual qualitative studies. And we know that the study is focused on a small population and this is their experience and their meaning. How do we even group that with other studies? And hopefully, throughout this course, you will consider these critical questions and we will try to answer some of them as we go along. For now, let's go back and think about the power of many primary studies. So, one individual primary study has with it its own set of limitations and scope. If you think about a project that you might have been involved in, I'm thinking about a project where where we interviewed car guards in the parking lot of the mall. A very focused study on a group of participants. It was four male participants. We did a photo voice study looking at the experiences of car guarding, looking at the experiences of Cape Town, of the city, and what their aspirations and hopes were for the future. Now, if I think about that, four individuals, wonderful people, would it add power to what I could say if I could find other studies also conducted in Cape Town with car guards in other suburbs instead of just one? What if there was a way to look at all the available papers and to confidently say that I found this about 30, 40, 50 car guards across Cape Town from multiple studies conducted over the last 5 years? Is there collective power in many primary studies? If I think about Sir Ian Chalmers, he said the results of a particular research study cannot be interpreted with any confidence unless they have been considered together with the results of other studies addressing the same or similar question. It should come as no surprise that Ian Chalmers was the founder of the Cochrane collaboration. And Cochrane, as you know, is one of the organizations who lead syntheses of evidence and systematic reviews. So, we know what the evidence is. We consider that there might be power in more than one primary study and grouping the evidence together. We have the qualitative in qualitative evidence synthesis, but what about systematic reviews? What does it mean? A systematic review attempts to collate all the empirical evidence that fits a pre-specified eligibility criteria to answer a specific research question. It uses explicit, systematic methods that are selected with a view to minimize bias, thus providing reliable findings from which conclusions can be drawn and decisions can be made. So, if we think about these systematic reviews, how do these compare to the literature reviews that we usually do at the start of our theses, projects, and papers? I would like to show you the evidence hierarchy, which some of you may be familiar with already. On this evidence hierarchy, we have ranked types of studies designs and the strength of the evidence as it moves up the triangle. So at the bottom, we have expert opinions, and maybe at the bottom of that, we would have social media opinions, Facebook experts. You know, we always have people that are experts in everything on Facebook, so they would be even below the orange line. Then we would have editorials, then case studies or series. Then we would have case control studies, then cohort studies, which is more than one person over a long period of time. Then we would have RCTs or randomized controlled trials. And above that, right at the top of the evidence hierarchy, is systematic reviews. So let's go even deeper into these systematic reviews. This is an evidence permit by St. John and McNeill in 2017. They are from the geoscience education research discipline. And in their triangle or evidence pyramid, you can see that they have detailed further how qualitative research can be introduced onto the evidence pyramid. So at the bottom, we have expert opinion. Then moving up to case studies, we have qualitative and quantitative case studies. And further up, we have cohort studies, then meta-analyses, and then systematic reviews right at the top. And as you move up this triangle, there is an increasing amount of synthesis, size, and depth of a study, generalizability, and strength of the evidence. The very top two rows are filtered information, systematic. They have pre-specified conditions and they are conducted in a very transparent way. So a systematic review previously only included quantitative systematic reviews. We have branched out with qualitative reviews. So a systematic review includes study designs that are quantitative. A qualitative evidence synthesis includes study designs that are qualitative. Now, there are a number of methodologies and ways of conducting qualitative evidence syntheses. This is a broad umbrella term for all these methodologies. And when we speak about the qualitative evidence synthesis, we are doing a synthesis on primary qualitative studies. A QES will explore the how and why questions. It provides insights into perceptions, meanings, and experiences, and offers explanations and theories for a phenomena of interest. It is possible in a QES to use a grounded theory approach to build theory. You can use the QES to identify research gaps or to map existing data. You can use QES to test frameworks. You can use QES in so many ways. And in the weeks upcoming, you will have a session on types of qualitative evidence syntheses. And you will see just how this area of work has just expanded, and there's so much more still to do around methods of QES. I would now like us to look at the type of review articles that we will be talking about over the next few weeks. We will be focusing our conversation mostly on the qualitative evidence synthesis, but I would like to place it here into this diagram. So the small dot in the blue is where we will place our individual primary study, in our case a qualitative primary study. When we take lots of primary studies together, then we are moving towards a systematic review, which is referred to a qualitative evidence synthesis. The smaller white circle is called the metasynthesis. So this is the analysis that we conduct within the qualitative evidence synthesis. And when we do reviews of many qualitative evidence syntheses, we have this larger circle, and that is called an overview. So an overview of qualitative systematic reviews. So why are research syntheses important? Firstly, it helps us evaluate the results of a given study in context of other studies. It provides justification for future research, so it's really easy for us to see when we conduct the syntheses what primary studies are still needed. It helps us make sense of existing research. It also helps us cope with information overload. I know at one point in the HIV systematic review that we were doing, which also included qualitative primary studies, the diagram that we showed of existing primary studies just skyrocketed in from 2018 because people were still publishing more and more primary studies on the same topic. We couldn't get a sense of where the evidence gaps were. We couldn't make sense of all the information, and we decided to conduct a QES. And from those findings, we were able to develop a model. And in this model, we could look at the theories that were existing and come up with a new conceptual model of understanding. It also helps other researchers to facilitate their access to relevant research. So a lot of the times, imagine looking for over 200 primary studies when you're trying to look at a literature review or write a background for something. That's going to be really hard. But if you could find one systematic review that synthesized the evidence for you, aha, here we have a winner. Here we have one article which we can download and look at the latest evidence, the quality of the evidence, and what is still missing. Systematic reviews also give us better accountability. So the methods that we are going to learn throughout this course is going to show you how to be transparent, how to have rigor in your syntheses, and how to be accountable to your reader, making this qualitative evidence synthesis a piece of work that can be trusted and be used in decision making. This is an example of the qualitative evidence syntheses that we recently conducted on antiretroviral therapy. So in this particular qualitative evidence syntheses, we included hundreds of studies to the point where we had so many studies that we had to do sampling in the included studies. And in week number 3, you're going to be talking about sampling. And there are so many methods that is borrowed from primary qualitative research that are introduced into the QES process. And what you will see is that in the QES, it really complements research evidence in light of user reported and practitioner observed considerations. It really provides an integrative and comparative outcome of the qualitative studies. It interprets the findings in a broader aspect of a particular subject. It can be used to assess barriers and facilitators for any service or uptake, and being generalized in nature, it increases its worth compared to local surveys or studies, or just one qualitative primary study. So, in your resource pack on the portal, you will have access to some reading and examples of qualitative research. If you do not have access to that research pack and you are just watching this video, please look for this article in PLOS ONE by Ingrid Ishon Wilson and colleagues. It's a 2019 systematic review on HIV adherence. So, this is the bonus slide. This is where everything starts to make sense. So we've been talking about QES for such a long time now. What are the steps involved in writing and developing a QES? We have to start with the formulation and the refinement of a question. So as we journey through this course, we are going to go through each of these steps, and hopefully when you work with this course, you will develop each of these as we go along in the weeks. After we develop a question, we need to start thinking about registering our title or the full protocol online. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a bit. Thirdly, we must search for relevant literature. So remember, we've already now developed the protocol in step number 2. The protocol identifies our question, our methods, our search strategy, who is going to do which part of the work, what types of studies will be included, what types of studies will be excluded. It's going to tell us about our data synthesis methodologies. It's going to tell us what analysis methods we prefer. It's going to talk to us about our critical appraisal. It's going to include information about circle. It's even going to include information about where um, this paper will be used for dissemination. So all of that pre-specified eligibility criteria and other conditions are inside of the protocol. That protocol is then registered online with the methods, and once it's registered, then you go ahead with the rest of the QES life cycle. This is how we ensure transparency in the review process. So, step number 3 is to search the literature. Now we are looking at different databases. We have said which databases we're going to look at, which journals we're going to include. We've also specified whether we are going to include grey literature, whether we're going to search the reference list of included studies. After that, our step number 4 is screening. And screening talks about us looking at all the studies that we found that was returned in our search. What process are we going to use to select the studies for inclusion into our synthesis? Usually this is done in different stages. The first stage is screening the titles of articles only. And when we screen titles only, it's really easy to get rid of articles that are not relevant. In the title, we are looking for elements that match our research question that we have already identified. After we have filtered out studies based on their titles, we then move to reading of abstracts. So again, at this point, we have not downloaded the full articles. We are only screening by titles and abstracts. Generally, this will help us filter a lot of studies out if our search was very wide. Once we have completed the title and abstract screening, then we look at full text articles. Ideally, screening should be done in duplicate, meaning by 2 or more people, and independently. So 2 persons are looking at the same article and deciding whether the studies are included or excluded. They then come together and check if their decisions are the same. Where their decisions are different, they will discuss and come to a conclusion. If they can't come to a conclusion, they then involve a third party or a third author to assist with the decision making on whether the study is in or out. Following this, we move to sampling. So, like in our previous review, where we had hundreds of studies that were decided that they are eligible for our qualitative evidence synthesis, and given our time and resources, it wasn't possible for us to look at all the papers. We then decided to sample based on thickness of the paper. We developed specific criteria and we included and sampled from the included studies. More about this in weeks to come. We then move to assessing the methodological strengths and limitations of the study. This is referred to as critical appraisal. Once we have appraised the studies, we then move to our data extraction and sum analysis. So, in our protocol, we pre-specified what we would be extracting from the papers. So, we might want to extract information about the population, the setting, the issue, and the outcomes. Those are our key data extraction items. We also want to extract information on what type of analysis was used, what type of sampling method was used in the study. We might want to know what the main findings were, and we want to know the answer to our research question. You can develop these data extraction databases in Excel. You can use programs, but more about that in weeks to come. Next, we move to our grade circle approach and we look at the confidence that we can place in the findings coming from the papers. Once we have done all of this, we then move to the data synthesis and writing up phase of your QES. This is a long process. You should look at between 12 to 24 months for you to conduct your qualitative evidence synthesis. This is, of course, based on the number of people involved in the review, the time that you have available, the money that you have available, and the access to databases. So all of these should be considered. Here are some examples of places that you could look at different reviews to get a sense of how they look. So one example is in the Cochrane Library, and I've put the link for you there so that you can locate these QESs. You are able to type into the search bar your interest area. You can also visit the Campbell collaboration for examples of qualitative evidence syntheses, as well as the Environmental Evidence website and library, and the Johannesburg Institute, which has manuals for evidence synthesis. There's also the Cochrane Handbook, which you can refer to for guidance on intervention reviews as well as qualitative evidence synthesis. So once you have your rationale down pat that this is definitely the method that I need, I have a qualitative research question and I really want to find out what the existing evidence says about my research question, and a qualitative evidence synthesis meets the eligibility for what I need. Then you need to gather your group of authors together. A qualitative evidence synthesis cannot be conducted by one author. You need people to check in duplicate with you. And once you have that information, you then need to consider registering your title and your protocol. So why would we register our title or our protocols online? For simple reasons. It's a large investment to make in this type of study. You're looking at a period of 1 to 2 years and lots of person power involved in this project. You definitely do not want to duplicate an existing study. You also want to promote transparency in your review process. You encourage and welcome peer review and methodological support. And the places that you can consider the publications of your protocol is the Cochrane Library or BMC Systematic Reviews, for example. There are many journals that are now accepting protocols for QESs. It does count as a publication, so you can actually get two publications out of your review. You can have your protocol and your final review paper. Very important. Lots of journals will ask you for your registration number of your protocol when publishing your final review. One of the places where you can check other protocol registrations is on Prospero, and that is this website that is listed over here. If you type this into your search bar and type in any area that you are invested in, it's easy to look for other protocols there. You can register on any of these. Cochrane has different groups that are focused on different areas, so you would then contact the appropriate and relevant group if you are working on an intervention review that has a qualitative component. You may register with the Campbell collaboration, and if it's a non-Cochrane or non-Campbell review, you can also register it on Prospero, and this is where I've registered most of my reviews on. So when we think about conducting a qualitative evidence synthesis, there are some considerations that that we have to think through before we embark on this process. Number one, the nature of the research. Does the primary research support the method? And will the synthesis method result in the expected and desired outcomes? We can't do QES just for the sake of doing QES. You must have a valid reason for conducting this and making it part of your study. You have to think about the nature of the researcher. How tolerant is the researcher to the amount of structure and the ambiguity that is inherent in this method? Remember, we spoke about subjectivity in the beginning. And is the epistemological stance congruent with that of a synthesis method? You have to consider the nature of the research team. Is there a necessary mix of disciplinary, methodological, and other perspectives amongst the research team to enact the method? Is the expertise that is needed? I have found when conducting QES, it's been really helpful for me to reach out to other researchers and experts in the field that can assist with my review. So some experts might be content experts, some might be a methodological expert, and some might be an outside reader that has expertise in publishing the review. This is really important to make your review successful. You should also consider the resources that you have, your personnel, your time, your effort, and the funding that is necessary to support this type of project. So in conclusion, if you are brave enough to start, you are strong enough to finish. The QES provides valuable insights to the human experience, and it is an adventure and one that you definitely will enjoy.